And so, it begins. Dark were the skies and chill was the wind as the land was covered in a veil of malice. Across the hill did ride a dread army of the night, cloaked in mist and fog, prepared to rain down death and destruction upon the land. And the people did crowd for a savior, a noble soul to save them from their impending demise. Just as it seemed all was lost, in strode a mighty hero, clad in shimmering metal from head to toe. Wielding a terrible broadsword, he did cleave his foes in two, smashing their ranks asunder with righteous fury. And when the day was done and the enemy strewn across the fields in pieces, the people did turn to the warrior and say, "We shall name this day in your honor. Speak unto us your wisdom." The warrior said one word that day: epic.
One man, one murloc, one giant angry badger. This is Blue Plz. It begins now. Yes, indeed, folks. Welcome to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio. The date today is the 27th of Feb 2009. I'm cool because I shortened that word. Can never really pronounce it properly. Always had a bit of an issue with that particular month. That's why I don't like it. But this is Blue Plz on WoW Radio. 3 days after the last airing of Blue Plz on WoW Radio, which was like 10 days after the last airing of Blue Plz on WoW Radio. Which, yeah, but we could go on with this for a while. There really is no point. What have we got coming up in the show today, you might ask? And I might answer! Because I'm feeling like it. But if I didn't feel like it, I wouldn't answer. This could be a problem for you, because you'd be left wondering, I wonder what he's going to talk about today on Blue Plz. I have no idea. I do, thankfully. I have a list here. It consists of 5 lines. My entire show condensed down into 5 lines. Anyway, yes! What are we talking about today? Well, the Hearthstone's getting changed. Yeah, after all of the excitement of like 3 days ago when all that new content came out, I was like, oh my god, look at all that stuff. The Argent Tournament, World Events, New Ulduar, all this cool stuff, everything's got a hard mode. And this time we have Hearthstone got buffed. Yay. Seriously, WoW is made entirely of pits and troughs. Or peaks and troughs. It actually is made of pits and troughs. Seriously, it's just all bad. No. Peaks and troughs. Just, they announce some great stuff, and then they just come out with these silly little changes. We will be talking about it later on in the show, although I must say, I don't personally have an opinion on it. At all. I don't care. Being a mage, it doesn't affect me in the slightest. I can portal more. Yay, I can do that anyway. But we will be talking about the difference between happy money and unhappy money. And whether or not changes like this are caving into whining or providing simply convenience for the player base. And what is the rationale behind making such seemingly small changes after like 4.5 years? We should be going into that a little bit later on the show. Also, AQ20 retrospective. Arcanist Belt got re-raiding as opposed to raiding. Yes, we're back on the scene and we went and cleared AQ20. And we enjoyed it very much. Arcanist Belt, of course, being the level 60 guild that we're running to do old game content. Yeah, I suppose that'll work. It'll do for the moment. We're talking about AQ20 and the lessons that were learned from the second ever 20-man instance and doing a little bit of a comparison and discovering some rather interesting things that I hadn't noticed before Wrath of the Lich King. A lot of interesting inspiration in there. We'll go into that a little bit later on the show. Also, 10 and 25 mans. The problem. I.e., the problem being that Blizzard have no idea what they're doing with them. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later on the show. We're going to try and decide, with your help, of course, whether or not 10 and 25 man should be separate but equal, or completely different. Who knows? But we've got to define them somehow, because Lord knows Blizzard seems unable to do so. Right. That's all that out of the way. We go into the mailbag in just a moment. Actually, no. Let's go to the mailbag now. You don't want to hear about my woes.
That sounds like it's mail time. Here's the mail.
It never fails.
It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes,
I want to wail.
Yes, indeed, it is time for the mail. Yes, the mail. I have been looking in my box of mail, and I found things. Yes, I have. So let's have a look at it. First mail comes up from Holy Ice and says this. Hi, TB. Lately in Blue Plz, you've been talking about how you no longer need a certain class in raids anymore. Also, you've been talking about hard modes, like killing extra stuff to get more loot, so I thought of an idea to sort of solve the problem with the classes. In each raid, there should be something like on the side to get more loot that plays to a class's spells. For instance, a trap is in the way of an optional boss, you need a rogue in your group to disarm it, then fight the boss to get loot. So for a druid, you maybe have to travel to the Emerald Dream, blah blah blah. This would make fights more challenging and fun. And also, if you want a specific loot table, you can take that class along as well. Now, I do like the idea of being able to sort of affect the loot table a little bit with your class balance, although I must say that having little encounters that need sort of gimmicks like that does seem a little bit pointless. What I like is when you design an encounter that can be done in several ways, but each strategy uses specific classes in order to do it. Dire Maul did this very well, the Tribute Run specifically. The Tribute Run was a very good example of having different classes doing different roles, but still being able to beat the instance without those classes. It was just easier, and you would perform better if you had certain classes. Like, for instance, a rogue for lockpicking and all that kind of thing. I don't know whether or not it really matters anymore, because now that they've homogenized the classes so much, it does seem to me that putting, like, class-specific stuff back into instances would be something of a waste of time. The issue that I had with Bring the Player, Not the Class was mainly because they made the instances way too easy, and I do blame that particular aspect of the raid design philosophy a little bit for that. But mostly because they've homogenized the classes so much as a result, and it's interchangeable. It's like you can really take anybody and it doesn't matter. I made the example of doing the instance with 23 hunters and a paladin, you know, that kind of thing. All sorts of crazy stuff. You can do these endgame instances with a completely unbalanced raid, and yet you just walk all over them. And what that causes is, you know, quite obviously, DPS classes particularly to suffer. Because obviously, if you have access to the top DPS, and there will always be a top class in DPS, and that may change from patch to patch, but generally speaking, in most of the encounters, there is a top class for DPS. You will take more of that class, and the other classes that can't perform so well will miss out, because raid utility doesn't matter so much anymore. And that's really the issue that I always had with Bring the Player, Not the Class. It wasn't so much a case of, hey, let's have some kind of gimmick, like the suppression room, again, where you have to disarm the traps. That's kind of long gone. Unfortunately, in its place has come a monumental sense of homogenization on the part of class balance, and I'm not a big fan of it. I like to see diversity, I like to see variety, I like to see classes finding their roles in the raid that don't get lumped down to 3 basic parts, healing, DPS, and tanking. It would be nice to have a little bit of colour in there, as opposed to merely slight shades of grey. Right, next email. This is an interesting email. This email is going to lead on to the 10 and 25-man discussion, and it says this. Hi-ho, TB. As you might have heard, in the past few days, we've had a blue post hinting at the removal of both the 10 and 25-man overall raid achievements for the Plagued and Black Proto-Drakes. Now, as a hardcore player, this is great news, as it lets me retain my elitist status, and all the nubs in Grass's Landing will know it. But the little casual in me, trying to break out, is furious. Now, these achievements are a pain in the arse to do. But what they do come down to, really, is the Immortal/Undying and 10/25-man Twilight Zone. I challenge anyone to find a real 10-man raiding guild, only 10-man gear and craftables, who have killed 3 drakes. Right, well, I want to just stop you there, because I do know that these guilds do exist. This is the mistake that a lot of people say. They always get into this argument and say, well, I bet this isn't the case. It's WoW. It's the case. It exists. There's 12 million players, somebody's doing it. Like, I saw a post on the forums today saying, oh, there's no such things as old-school raiding guilds because there's no way you could ever get 40 people together for it. It's like, there's 12 million players. That's a huge number of people. Of course there are people that do this. It's like real 10-man guilds that have done 3 Drakes with 10-man gear. Yeah, I imagine there are. I know of one that's definitely done it with 1 Drake, and will probably be going for 2 Drakes relatively soon and then 3. I would imagine there are more. If you know of any 10-man guilds, real 10-man guilds, quote-unquote, then by all means, send it into themurloc@gmail.com. Email me at themurloc@gmail.com if you know of any guilds like that. But I'm 99.999% sure that they exist, because it's WoW and there's tons of players, and I'm pretty sure that has happened. Now, if there aren't any, then I would say that there is a real issue with the way that 10 and 25-man has been conceived, but we'll come on to that in the next section of the show. Anyway, he goes on to say, the fight is nothing but a side game for 25-man raiders, and even then it's a challenge after the 3.0.8 buffs. Blizzard said repeatedly that it was a fight that shouldn't have been doable this early in the game and that would need old WoW gear to get through it, but now with them removing of the raider achievements, they're punishing bad players, yay, but also the small guilds who must be pissed enough that through no fault of their own they'll lose out on the chance to own a plagued Proto-Drake because Blizz botched their tuning of that encounter at release, making it too easy for 25-man raiders. That's from Mecha from Nordrassil EU. Yeah. I don't know, to be honest, whether Sarth 3 Drakes is way too difficult for a 10-man guild. I think that would be an interesting little thing to look at. But I must say, and this is something that goes all the way back to Wrath launch, when I was talking specifically about the removal of the titles for Archdruid and all that kind of stuff. It was basically the first to 80 titles, yeah? They removed them because people cried that they couldn't get them. The idea of diversity in the game is promoted by the idea of exclusivity within the game. The rarer an item is, the more desirable it is, and the more variety it brings into the game world. It ceases to be variety if everyone's got it. That's why the Black Warbear was very cool upon Wrath launch and is now the biggest scrub mount ever. Everyone rides them because everyone has done that stupid achievement. I don't ride one. I ride a big Blizzard bear. The white one with the Murloc that sits on top of it. Now that is a rare mount. That is a status symbol, that is a little bit of EP, that brings variety, it brings a splash of colour, again, to the game world, to have something that's different. Now, if people are complaining they can't get the black Proto-Drake or whatever, well, to be honest, I must say tough luck. Really. It's the same people that complained that they couldn't get the Armani Warbear after Wrath launch. It's like, you have had enough time to learn this encounter. If you were supposed to be good enough to clear everything, and I do mean everything, in the game, including all of those stupid achievements, then you should have got it by now. If you were not good enough to do that, then, to be honest, tough. Seriously. It's a mount, really. If everybody had it, it wouldn't be exclusive now, would it? No. It represents the group of people who are able to perform incredibly well during the first 3 months of the game. It's an achievement in a very real sense, an actual achievement, as opposed to a badge that you get given, somewhat like the baby Cub Scouts, where they give you badges just for showing up. It's a real achievement, made flesh, and you get to ride it about. And yes, it is unique. It's the same guys that got the albino raptors and stuff like that, the really old school raptors before they changed it. Yes, some people still do have those. And people complained that they couldn't get them anymore. Even though, of course, they changed the models into something way, way better. It's like, that is exclusivity. These are guys who raised a lot of money. 100 gold back then. Was it 1,000 gold actually to get an epic mount at that point? Yes, it was. An incredible amount of money at that point. 1,000 gold when the albino raptor was around? That is almost unthinkable. That was an achievement. There's maybe one guy on my server that has that. Now that is a genuine achievement right there. And of course you get people complaining that they can't get it. Look, you don't get to have everything. It's a sense of entitlement that I wish would go away in WoW, because the sense of entitlement has strangled the level of difficulty in the game, it's strangled the level of variety in the game in terms of gear and class. It's like, I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to do this. So, okay, we'll nerf it down so you can do it. We'll homogenize the classes so you can do it. We'll make it easier, 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 easier. I want a bear. Okay, everyone can have a bear. There was a quote in a Pixar movie, I believe, called The Incredibles. And just to paraphrase it, because I can't exactly remember what it was. And it was, if everyone is super, nobody is. Which is absolutely true. You are supposed to have a field of people, and some people are supposed to be down one end, and some people are supposed to be at the other. Now, if you take that personally, then that is your own problem. I have no sympathy for that. I have been on both ends of the spectrum. I have been in a cutting-edge-ish raiding guild who is doing the latest content and getting the best loot. I have been in a terrible raiding guild where I've had to fight them every inch of the way just to get them through the most basic of encounters. And I've been everywhere in between. And I have never at any point felt this kind of venom or spite or entitlement that says, I should be getting this. Like, no, I shouldn't be getting this because I'm not playing at that level. When I start playing at that level, maybe I can get a shot at it. And in the meantime, I can admire those people that did get that stuff, and I can feel good that they have achieved something. Because it's not all about me. You wouldn't want to see everybody in tier 7.5. It's easy to be special. We already have that now. You see everyone in tier 7.5. People who've got it from VOA, they don't even deserve it. Tier gear isn't special anymore. Epics aren't special anymore because everybody wanted them. So everyone got them. I remember back in the day, I'll be talking about AQ20 a little bit later on, and I'll tell you about the blues that you got in there in Zul'Gurub, when they thought that those smaller form, easier instances did not mean that you deserved epics all the time. But no, now you do something that is indeed easier than that content, and you're drowning in epics. Epics are not special anymore, epics are not epic, and this is all the same kind of problem, all wound down to this tiny little ball of hatred and entitlement that says, I want this. And I pay my subscription fee, so I am entitled to it, but I don't have to do the work for it. Variety is the spice of life, and variety is what keeps the game going, keeps the game interesting. I like looking at things which I cannot have. That's why I go window shopping. I window shop for mounts. I will never get that Drake, to be honest. So I probably won't get around to attending a 3 Drakes run and doing all the other stuff, but I don't care. Because other people got it, and it's brought a bit of colour to the horizon and my particular screen in the game. My name is TotalBiscuit, and you are listening to the one and only Blue Plz here on WoW Radio. I've got some Haunted for you. This may contain strong language. I will be right back after this. You are listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed due to copyright concerns. If you'd like to hear the music, tune in live on Fridays at 8 p.m. British Standard Time. That is 3 p.m. EST on WCRadio.com. Additional streaming servers are not available. Please try again later. Would be the words you would be hearing were you not listening to Blue Plz on WoW Radio with its crashing internet. It is fine. The internet is, as I've been told, a series of tubes. I'm sure it can handle it. Right. Now, we have started a debate, so we shall get on with said debate. Yes, we will. Now, 10 and 25 mans. The subject has been raised. The bar has been set. So let's talk about 25 mans. Try and find out just what exactly is going on with those things. Right, 10 and 25 mans. This is a big issue, in my opinion. And the reason it's a big issue is because when the idea first came around, I had some concerns about whether or not it would be implemented correctly. And as it usually does turn out, I unfortunately was correct. I wish I wasn't, you know. I don't wish these kind of things upon people. But sadly, that's what it ended up being. Now, let's have a look back at the older instances, the way that they used to do it. Now, of course, you had two kinds, well, you technically had three kinds of raiding in original WoW. You had the 15 to 10 man, which was, of course, UBRS, post and pre-nerf. Not necessarily in that order. We also had 20 mans, and then we had 40 mans. Now, the 40 mans and the 15 man were what were in there originally. You had Onyxia, you had Molten Core, and you had UBRS. Those were your three raids. Now, Blackwing Lair came out, and they also brought out Zul'Gurub. Zul'Gurub was a easier instance to some degree, and it was designed for 20 people because there were concerns that 40 people was excessive, and that getting that many people online at any given time could be tricky, particularly when you were scheduling a raid that would likely last for at least 4 hours, probably more. And of course their concerns were, to most degrees, correct in that regard. So they brought out 20 man. Now, this 20-man was tuned way under, mostly at any rate, the current content. However, I think there's a perception that they actually ended up tuning it over Molten Core because of the way the gear is. Now, you've just got to bear in mind that the item level of the gear in Zul'Gurub versus Molten Core is pretty similar in most respects. Some of it isn't, some of it is. However, the gear in Zul'Gurub was better itemized. So that kind of skews the view of difficulty that you can have in comparing, say, Molten Core to Zul'Gurub. Now, of course, later on we had AQ20, which was more difficult in some places, but pretty much about on par with Zul'Gurub. There were a few items that were certainly a little bit better, and the item level was slightly higher, but mostly the gear was kind of on par with Zul'Gurub level stuff. Now, Blackwing onwards was pretty much uniformly better than anything that you could get in Zul'Gurub or AQ20. And that was the way it was. The difficult raids were 40-mans, and the not-so-difficult raids were 20-mans. Let's have a look at TBC. TBC, of course, changed it to 10 and 25. They felt that 40 was too many. There were outcries that perhaps raids would not be so epic anymore, but evidently they did end up being pretty epic regardless. So I can forgive them for that. Blizzard were right. I will give them that particular piece of kudos. Now, 10 and 25. What do you have? You had your Karazhan, you then had your Gruul, you then had your Magtheridon, you then had your SSC, you then had your TK. You didn't have another 10-man, indeed, until before Sunwell, as I recall. And that was with Zul'Aman. Now, Zul'Aman item loot was better. It was a higher level than Karazhan's, in pretty much all respects. However, the instance was also more difficult than Karazhan, in almost all respects. Was it more difficult than anything else? Well, I'd say that it was more challenging than stuff like Void Reaver and parts of SSC, but then again, the difficulty in a lot of TBC, at least pre-Hyjal and Blackwing Lair, what am I talking about? Black Temple. A lot of black in WoW. A lot of black and evil and darkness and heretics and monsters and Sindri. Anyway, the level of difficulty was a little bit inconsistent in between SSC and TK, and quite a few of the encounters in Zul'Aman ended up being better. I certainly say better, more difficult than some of the stuff that was in those instances. And you wouldn't have thought that that should be the case, but it ended up being that way. Now, Zul'Aman had some quality loot. It really did. It had loot that was better than SSC, better than TK, in many respects. Not all of it, some of it. You were looking at items, say, like the Caster Dagger and Caster Sword, were better than the equivalent items in SSC, and they were better than the equivalent items in TK. Up to, perhaps, the Nexus Key, which was the staff off of the final boss, which, of course, was therefore a higher item level than the rest of the instance. And you had a look at that difficulty, and you're like, this is pretty interesting. And, of course, it had the optional hard mode, as you know. You are able to do it faster, run the gauntlet, get extra loot. Now we get to Wrath, where we have 10 and 25 mans. Every raid that we have, as you're well aware, has a 10 and 25 man version. And we have a situation where we really don't know where we're at. Now, some people would argue that a 10-man version of an instance is naturally going to be easier. However, as proven with, say, Sartharian 3 Drakes with 10 people, and indeed to some degree Malagos with 10 people, that is not true. With Malagos, having done both of them, I would say that Malagos 10 is on a par, difficulty-wise, with Malagos 25. And most people say, have not done it yet, will do it probably this week, if I manage to get on for that particular raid, since our guild is doing Sartharian 3 Drakes, and has already in fact killed Sartharian 3 Drakes. The Sartharian 3 Drakes in 10-man is harder than on 25-man, simply because of the way the mechanics mesh together, and the number of players that you have, and you cannot have everyone screwing up in a 10-man. Now the question is, bearing in mind that 10-man loot is universally worse than 25-man loot, which is the way to go? Do we want a situation where 10-mans are simpler and give lesser level loot? Or do we want a situation where 10-mans are separate but equal and give equivalent level loot, but are simply designed for less people? Now that is a great question. Now some people would argue that this is kind of already the case. The difference between 10 and 25 man loot, while marked, is not ridiculous, at least in most respects. There are of course some items that do shirk that particular trend. I am wearing some of them and I am very pleased to be doing so. But the difference between, say, Tier 7 and Tier 7.5, they both have the same set bonus, as we're well aware, and item level differences are marked, but not major. And more importantly, the difference in stats is not major. Let's do some comparisons, shall we? Let's open up some Wowhead and go check it out. Let's go and have a look at my favourite class, the Mage. Let's go read about Frostfire gear and do a little bit of comparison. And then perhaps we can come to a conclusion as to whether or not the current balance is correct. Well, it would seem that there are pop-ups on Wowhead for Party Poker, and they really need to get that sorted out. Now, let's have a look at these. The Heroes Frostfire Gloves versus the Valorous Frostfire Gloves. Here are the stats for the Heroes. This is the Tier 7 version. 57 Stamina for 51 Intellect, a red socket. 33 hits, 48 crit, and 59 spell power. Versus the Valorous Frostfire Gloves, which is 64 Stamina, 57 Intellect, red socket. 38 hit, 53 crit, and 69 spell power. That's a difference of 10 spell power. That is a difference of 5 crit. That is a difference of 5 hit. That is a difference of some stamina that no one really cares about. And 6 intellect. That is the difference between them. And the item level on there is not showing. Oh, there it is. 213 versus 200. That's the item levels. Tier 7 is item level 200, whereas Tier 7.5 is item level 2.75. What? No, it isn't. Item level 2.75 would be like the worst item ever. It's item level 213. Now, is that a big enough difference? Is that balanced? Well, I don't think most would argue that, say, 10-man Nax is harder than 25-man Nax, because it isn't. It's not. There are marked differences, there are a lot of nerfs to particular aspects of the raid, which make it easier. But what about Malagas, and what about Sartharian? Sartharian 10 versus Sartharian 25 with no Drakes is pretty much the same fight. Almost identical in every respect. Yet the loot that is given from Sartharian 10 is obviously worse than Sartharian 25. Now that indicates a balance issue there. It's a bit of a mixed set of signals that were being given. Now, my understanding, and please do try and correct me if I'm wrong on this one, was that the idea behind having 10 and 25-man versions of every instance was not to give an easy and a hard version. Indeed, they have demonstrated that they can do that with the same number of players, i.e. normal and heroic. They don't need 10 and 25-mans, of course, one of which being 2.5 times the size of the other, in order to show a difficulty difference. That is not actually needed, it's not required. The idea, as far as I could see, at least this is what I would have done, is to make 10 and 25 separate but equal. There are guilds, and there are people, there are a sizable chunk, in my opinion, of people, that either prefer or are forced to raid in 10-man groups. Some people prefer it. Indeed, Kikijiki's guild, Why So Serious, runs 10-mans exclusively. And the claim is that they prefer that. They prefer raiding with a smaller group of people, there is less drama, there is more focus on individual skill, as opposed to being able to slack off in a 25-man. It's more personal, you get to do it with friends. Getting together 9 friends isn't that hard. Getting together 24 friends, that's a little bit trickier. So some would argue that the 10-man playstyle should be separate but equal to the 25-man playstyle. Now I suppose the question is, can they balance it correctly? Now, whether or not that's true would come down to whether or not you believe that Sartharian 3 Drakes was a fluke, and perhaps is, at least in the 10-man version, overtuned at this current time. Does it demonstrate their ability to design a hard 10-man encounter, or did they simply accidentally overbuff the encounter, overtune the encounter, and is it indeed too hard for its particular level? Or perhaps you believe that 10-mans should always be lesser, they should always be easier than the 25-man version, they should always give less loot. It's a very difficult call to make, because some people will make the argument that yes, raiding with 25 people and getting together 25 people should yield better loot, because it is a more challenging process. And yes, on a logistical perspective, it is. You can look at the same argument that's been used to prevent, say, single players, solo players, from getting equivalent loot to raiders. And indeed, I support that argument. It doesn't matter how long you labour away at a particularly repetitive task, it does not in any way, shape or form replace or simulate the difficulty of a raid encounter. That's why raiders get raid level loot, and that's why solo players don't. Because it doesn't matter. You can times the amount of work by 25, you can times the amount of work by 50, 100, 200. Same argument that people made when they said, let me exchange my badges of heroism for badges of valor. Same argument that was made, and of course the response from the sane people was no. You may not do this because you have not got to that level of content. It doesn't matter how many normal level dungeons you've done. It doesn't matter how many heroics you've done. You are not at 25-man level content. You have not done 25-man level content. You have not organized 24 other people to raid with you. You have not faced the challenges of 25-man content, which of course unfortunately is a little bit awful at the moment, but that is soon to change. Come Old War, we certainly hope. Therefore, you do not deserve that level of loot. Now, can the same argument be applied to those who merely raid 10 mans as opposed to 25? I am split and I am torn on this issue, and I am going to ask for your emails on it. And we shall be continuing this particular piece of discussion and revisiting it throughout the rest of the show, assuming my internet doesn't crash again. Email themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com. Which side do you fall on? Do you fall on the separate but equal, that believes that perhaps 10 man should be equal in difficulty and loot to 25 mans? Or do you fall on the side of easy and hard, normal and heroic, that believes that 10 mans should be easier and give lesser level loot than 25 mans? Or perhaps are you somewhere in between? I would like to know. I'd like to see a cross-section of opinion, because this is a very difficult topic. However, what I will say is this, and this I can say with no hint of uncertainty in my mind, and that is that Blizzard needs to make its mind up one way or the other. Because right now it is a mixed bag of ridiculous. Either you have separate but equal, or you have easy and hard. Now, I do not believe personally that you need easy and hard anymore if you're going to be putting hard mode into dungeons. But then again, we don't know what that's going to entail. We don't know how difficult that's really going to be. And it simply might be overtuned for some people. Who knows? So yes, let me know. Let's hear a cross-section and see if maybe we can decide for them on the role of 10 versus 25-man raid encounters. My name is TotalBiscuit, and you are listening to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio. I am going to play you some Night Rage. It's a condemned club, which I assume is a little bit different to a condemned mace. I'll be right back after this, folks. You're listening to WoW Radio on WCRadio.com. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed due to copyright concerns. If you'd like to hear the music, tune in live on Fridays at 8 p.m. British Standard Time. That is 3 p.m. EST on WCRadio.com.
Yes, full tier 7, complete clear of all TBC instances, Artharian 3 Drakes. Perfect raid attenders, very impressive, Mr. What did you say your name was?
Ah, you can call me the Count.
Yes, Mr. The Count. There's only one small problem.
Oh, and what would that be?
Well, you see, we're the Daywalkers, and...
Oh, I see. It's because of my racial heritage. That's what it is it?
No, I have nothing against you or your people personally, sir, but I'm just not sure we're the guild for you.
Preposterous! I love sunny afternoons, see? I shall cast open the curtains and look upon this a beautiful day.
I'm not sure that's such a good idea. Oh, it's gonna stain. WoW should fit into your schedule, not the other way around. We are the Daywalkers of Draktheron US, and we are a serious afternoon raiding guild. We are recruiting experienced players whose schedules favor raiding in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time. We raid on weekdays, and our first pull starts at 1:30 EST, that's 6:30 GMT. If you're serious about raiding but having trouble finding an alliance guild that suits your schedule, then you should check us out at daywalkersguild.com. We require 75 75% raid attendance, and ventrilo with a working microphone. If you fit the bill, then head over to daywalkersguild.com or speak to an officer in-game on Dractheron US. Oh, can someone get the janitor in here and clean up this mess?
Yes, indeed, folks, you're tuned into Blue Plz here on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit. Right, let's get straight on with it. But first, yes, let's get straight onto it. But first, quick shout out must go out to my old school guild. I say old school because I've only been in there for a couple of days, and yet the last time I was in there was in 2006, I believe. Lethe on Mazrigo, EU Horde side. Oh yes, we be clearing, and those nubs be dying on Thaddeus because they need to learn to play. They're slacking. That's what they are. Not impressed. Oh well. I'm sure they'll get the idea when they get slapped about a bit in on DPS meters by real mages. Yes. I remember when DPS could only be done by the truly hardcore, not you scrubs and your crazy hunter pets. 6,000 DPS by hitting steady shot over and over again? No! Preposterous! Inconceivable! Anyway, yeah. We're actually recruiting, by the way, so if you want to check us out, then go Google Lethe Guild or head to the Mazrigo Realm forums. You might want to get involved in that particular guild, because we be ready for Ulduar. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking very much forward to it. Now, another guild that I'm a member of course, is Arcanist Belt, which has come up quite a little bit over the last few months. It's our level 60 rating guild on Anachronus, and it's kind of like a history project. It's like going back in time to have a look at the way that instances used to be and attempt to play them in the most authentic way possible, i.e. stick to level 60, use only pre-TBC gear, only pre-TBC talents where possible. We've got no Shaman, we've got no Death Knights, etc., etc. Now, we entered our second raid, which was, of course, AQ20. The first raid involved a full clear of Zul'Gurub, which was very successful. And then we took a couple of weeks holiday because of various things like Valentine's Day and all that stuff. And then we came back and we did AQ20, which proved to be relatively challenging and rather enjoyable. Now, every time we're going to clear one of these instances, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a retrospective. And the purpose behind that retrospective is because I think we forget a lot of the time where a lot of the mechanics that we're now encountering actually came from in the first place. I think it's pretty important that we keep that in mind and see how far we've come. Now, AQ20 was, of course, released alongside AQ40 with the Shifting Sands, Terror of the Sands, I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, it was the Anchorage patch. Huge world event, 2 instances, both of which had to be unlocked by doing the world event and doing the war effort, which involved basically collecting a lot of Peace Bloom, which is rather ironic, to say the least. However, AQ20 was, and still is, in my opinion, a relatively well-designed instance. There are a few things I do not like about it, but it is still pretty solid. Now, I first got to play this instance back in 2005 at BlizzCon. They actually had it on beta there. We got to play it, and we got to be geared up in all sorts of things, and it was pretty fun. And I remember doing the first few pulls. I actually remember playing a healer, and I was really bad at it. And I've never attempted to play a healer ever again. I think I spammed Greater Heal over and over again and went I don't know what I'm doing as a healer. I do depths. That's what I do. Now, I like to go through boss by boss and also have a look at the trash and compare it to some of the stuff we're now encountering, and we might find some rather interesting conclusions. Now, initially, of course, there is a bunch of horrible, horrible patrolling trash, which really don't add anything in particular to the raiding scene. It was mostly generic kind of trash. Nothing particularly exciting there. The exciting trash came later. Now, first boss that you deal with is Kuranax. Kuranax is a big sand, worm, centipede kind of thing. He has a bigger brother called Thancred, which can be found in AQ40, and Kuranax is a relatively decent challenge for those who kind of suck at the game. Otherwise, he's not particularly hard. Now, the mechanics of Kuranax are something that I don't recall ever really being repeated, although it did introduce the idea, well, not so much introduced the idea, but it certainly brought to the fore the idea of stand out of the fire. Now, of course, there had been other mechanics based around stand out of the fire, such as Magmadar, that had stand out of the fire. We could also talk about Baron-Geddon, which was stay away from the fire, and stuff like that. But this really did bring the idea of get out of the fire and stay out of the fire into the forefront as regards to raiding. Now, the mechanic behind it was called Sand Trap, and Sand Trap would come up from beneath the sand, as you might expect. And if you were standing in the AoE range of the bubble when it burst, you would be silenced for 20 seconds. Of course, that being an absolute killer for anybody who was attempting to heal. If all your healers got sand trapped, you're pretty much dead on the spot. Didn't help that Kurinax also did a lot of damage. It also did a 75% hit reduction on melee characters. So the tanks couldn't hit, therefore couldn't build threat. The DPS couldn't do anything. Pretty much standing in a sand trap was a bad thing. It was imperative that you got out of them. It really was. Not so much like, say, the fires on Magmadar. You probably wouldn't die from those. You might take a bit of damage, but these were absolutely imperative. Very interesting mechanic and caught a lot of people off guard initially. It also had a mechanic whereby you had to swap tanks due to stacking debuffs. Naturally, you saw stacking debuffs later on in Naxxramas and in various other instances. The idea of stacking debuffs is an interesting one. Switching tanks is interesting, although of course it did require at least 2 and preferably 3 tanks in order to properly perform this particular encounter. It also had a 30% in rage, which is something that you will also find in other parts of the instance. There is a percentile based in rage on a couple of the bosses. Otherwise, it didn't really add all that much. Now, what was interesting here is that the second boss came directly after the first. And the second boss is what introduced a very intriguing new mechanic into the game, which was used for an entire instance later on. And those of you who know the encounter I'm talking about will know that it is General Rajax. Now, General Rajax had a couple of interesting mechanics. And a lot of these have been duplicated. He was based on waves. The entire encounter was based on waves. You had to fight various waves of trash, which came at various different intervals and consisted of various different monsters, including mini-bosses, and then you get to fight the end boss. It was an endurance fight, the likes of which had not really been seen before. Now, it also introduced the idea of NPCs that would help you in the fight. Now, waves and NPCs with a boss at the end. Can somebody please tell me which instance that sounds like to you? You get 10 seconds to answer that question. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Have you answered the question? The answer, you should know, is Mount Hyjal. The entire instance is based on that principle. The entire instance. Where do you think it came from? AQ20. There are NPCs that help you, but if they die, there is something bad happens. In the case of Mount Hyjal, if the main NPCs die, you actually lose, which kind of sucks. In this case, you end up losing out on certain things. Now, keeping the NPCs alive was, how do I put this? A little bit hard. And of course, the modus operandi of the fight was to attempt to keep these NPCs alive because they would give you a particular buff. They would also give you extra loot. But keeping them alive was hard. I wonder what that sounds like to you. Yes, indeed. Another example of the prototype hard mode. More refined than the version that we found in Zul'Gurub, which involved Hakkar not killing his priests. There was no good reason not to kill his priests. They gave extra loot, and you didn't gain any extra loot for killing Hakkar while the priests were up. However, they took the concept, they changed it, they introduced it into Rajax with NPCs. If you kept the NPCs alive, you gained more rep, and you gained the ability to buy special items. So yes, you did technically get extra loot. The evolution of the hard mode is very interesting to see because you see it. Every now and again it crops up in those instances. And you can see the evolution of the idea. I find that very intriguing. Now, on to the next boss. Now, this boss, I am trying to think of any boss that's even close to this. Feel free to let me know in the IRC or email me at themurloc@gmail.com if I'm simply missing something. But Burrow the Gorger. Burrow the Gorger, one of my favourite encounters. It's wonderful. It has the fixate mechanic. Now, fixate has been used in certain other encounters before. Of course, Zul'Gurub being a prime example. There are a couple of others, as I recall. The idea of fixating this encounter was this particular encounter was untankable. Yes, it was. Were there any encounters before that were untankable? Well, think about it. Molten Core, anything untankable? No. Unless you count Ragnaros, which I don't. How about Zul'Gurub? Anything untankable in there? Not really, no. So yeah, it was the first example of an untankable encounter. The idea being that no, you could not simply tank and spank it. AQ20 moved away from tanking and spanking in a lot of different respects. And that's a very good thing, I must say. It was a fight based on movement, and there weren't all that many of those. In fact, I can barely think of any. There are two particular encounters that, in fact, possibly three, that really involve a lot of movement in AQ20. This was the first, Burrow the Gorger. You had to pull Burrow the Gorger over eggs, and you had to burst those eggs while he was over them. Yes, indeed. The only real way to do damage was to utilize objects within the world that were specifically placed there for that purpose. Tricky. Very tricky indeed. Rather unique mechanic. He also had the best in rage that anyone's ever come up with, where his head pops off at 20%. And you have to DPS him down as a plague progressively kills your raid. A DPS rate of the highest caliber. In my opinion, Burrow is a perfect encounter. There is nothing wrong with Burrow the Gorger at all. It is in concept absolutely perfect. Now, to the next encounter. Moem. The evil Obsidian Destroyer type thing. Moem was a relatively easy encounter, which involved a lot of mana draining. If you do not mana drain, and of course this was something that was introduced to some degree in Zul'Gurub, mana draining was done in Zul'Gurub because some of the stuff was quite unpleasant, and you could disable its abilities far easier than you could say in Molten Core, where the mana reserves would be absolutely enormous. We're talking like 200, 300,000 mana, whereas the stuff in Zul'Gurub had more like 15 to 20k mana, which was easily drainable. If you did not drain Moem would explode and do a hideous amount of damage to everyone. Aside from that, Moem really didn't do anything all that interesting. It was a mana-draining fight, which, back in the day, when replenishment did not exist, was a relatively big drain on your raid. It was, to some degree, a DPS race, because the magic users would run out of mana if you were not too careful. Other than that, nothing particularly notable. Now, the final encounter. I'm going to miss out AMS the Hunter, because, to be honest, I don't care about AMS the Hunter. AMS the Hunter's got like 20-30 minutes of trash before it. You need a Hunter to tank it. Nobody cares. So let's ignore AMS the Hunter in favour of the more interesting boss that is, of course, Assyrian. Assyrian is a masterfully designed encounter. But before that, we had the Anubasath warriors, the big Anubasath guardian things, huge things. And you'd see them again in AQ40, but these were like core hounds on crack. They had a variety of different abilities, which involved, of course, a lot of movement. There was a devouring plague that could spread to other members of the raid unless you moved away from the raid very quickly. There was a war stomp, which meant that you had to keep out of melee range. They all could also summon adds, they could explode, and they could bring down meteors on the raid, which would be spread damage. Therefore, you'd have to clump up in order to avoid them. They also had a resistance, indeed a reflection, to particular schools of magic, and they could have any combination of those abilities, which was pretty awesome. Very good example of very interesting and intriguing trash. Admittedly, there are, and still are, way too many of those in the final room. Now, let's talk briefly about Assyrian and why this fight was just so masterfully done. Again, another movement-based fight. This fight was based on timing, and it was based on scouting. The amount of situational awareness required in this fight is, in my opinion, second to none. There are very few encounters that even come close. This is the only fight that I can think of where you had to make use of the entire huge arena, and you had to have somebody outriding and scouting for crystals. The idea being that you dragged Assyrian from crystal to crystal. He would start in Supreme Mode, which would one-shot the tank. The only way to get rid of the Supreme Mode was to activate a crystal nearby. The crystals would spawn in random locations. You had to kite him from one crystal to another, and all the while there were tornadoes going off in the arena. And he could do war stomps and envelop people in wind, and do knockbacks and all manner of interesting, intriguing stuff. Perfect example of a fight that required an awful lot of movement. very dynamic, very interesting, a complete and total departure from Tank and Spank. And indeed, in my opinion, AQ20 was the biggest departure from Tank and Spank that we saw at that stage in Classic WoW. And I think a lot of lessons have definitely been learned there to make fights a little bit more interesting. We've seen a lot more movement-based fights. We saw a lot more in Nax. We saw some in AQ40. We continue to see them all the way through TBC and indeed into Wrath, and we can no doubt see a lot more fights that will involve a lot more movement. Less tanky-spanky. And that is a good thing. My conclusion? AQ20 is still pretty much as fun as it was. A little bit too much trash, a lot of very interesting encounters. I'm looking forward to going back in there again to get some sand-polished hammers. Oh yes. Base rogues know what I be talking about. My name is TotalBiscuit, and you are listening to the one and only Blue Plz here on WoW Radio. I'm gonna play you some music. It shall be cheesy, it shall be awesome, it shall be Ed Guy. And I have so much of this, I really do. Which one should we choose? I have no idea. This one will do. I'll be right back after this, folks. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed due to copyright concerns. If you'd like to hear the music, tune in live on Fridays at 8 p.m. British Standard Time. That is 3 p.m. EST on WCRadio.com. Yes, indeed, folks, the sounds of Ed Guy nailed to the wheel. My name is TotalBiscuit, and you are listening to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio. The best solo-hosted WoW show in the world. Yes, I will put that out there, because I think it might currently be the only solo-hosted WoW show in the world. It's all good. Bragging is fine if you're in an empty room. Now, I have more topics to discuss, and we certainly do not have time to muck about. So I'm going to muck about. I'm going to read some emails, because we're on the subject of 10 versus 25 mans. We want to know which camp you fall into as regards to what do you think it should be. Should they be separate but equal, or should one be easier than the other? So I've got some things to have a look at. We've got Richard Knox, who says this: make the raid where back in pre-TBC, where you need everyone to work as a team, not where you can take 8 people to a 10-man and 20 people to a 25-man, down the boss and then make 25-man harder. Just FYI, pre-TBC you could do that an awful lot. In fact, the only encounters you really couldn't do it on were some of the harder Nax ones and maybe Cthulhu. You could slack in pretty much any other instance. Really. I mean, Molten Core, you only really needed 25 out of 40 people, and you could have 15 people standing around doing nothing. In fact, we did it with 25 people incredibly easily, and that was at level appropriate. So no, I think you have a very rose-tinted view of pre-TBC if you actually think it was like that. In fact, I would say, to be quite honest, the TBC was the one that nailed it the best. Where you really did have to have all your 25 people going, mainly because of the enraged timers. Hey TB, this is from Limus, and he says this: I would say that the 10 and 25 man raids should be of the same difficulty with the same quality of loot. The amount of players you do a raid with does not determine your skill. A group of 10 players can be of the same skill level as a group of 25 and therefore should get the same loot. The only thing that Blizzard has to keep in the back of their minds is that making content accessible and challenging for both sides does not equal making content easy, as it seems they sometimes view 10-man players as unskilled players. They just have a limited amount of time up for this kind of playstyle. Yeah, that does sum it up. I think the preference for playstyle is the biggest argument. Having limited time is really not a valid argument because 10-mans take about as long as 25-mans. Indeed, I've actually seen them take longer. The amount of time you have is not relevant to how many people you can get in a raid. You could have, if you only have like a few hours a week and you find 24 other people with only a few hours a week, you can still do it. It's the same argument people made. It's like, oh well, WoW raiding isn't casual friendly because you need a lot of people and I don't really have a lot of time to play. Okay, fine, just make a big guild then. Now, I've seen casual guilds have 200, 300 players and field multiple raids. And it's like, yeah, 75% of your guild can be offline at any given time and you can still field 2 raids worth of players. That's how you do it. If you have issues, you just join a big guild. And by big, it doesn't have to mean amazingly good. You can just join one of those big Zerg guilds. They do the job. So, no, I don't believe that saves time or actually benefits anyone with limited time. To be honest,
It's about the coordination of several people and just finding the kind of people that will be able to raid at the same time as you. However, the playstyle argument I think is the strongest. I do believe that, yes, it is completely valid to want to simply raid with 9 other people instead of 24 other people. It's more personal. You can just get all your friends together to do it. You don't have to invite randoms. There's less loot drama. It's a little bit more focused, and yes, you can focus on the individual people within the raid. And indeed, you can have one of every class at the moment, which is kind of cool. Anyway, let's continue. More emails on the 10 and 25 man subject. This is from Nairafen. He says this: Hey TB, looking at Blizzard, what Blizzard has done with loot at least suggests that they intended 10 and 25 man to be different. Elements of heroism are obtained from both normal heroics and 10 man raids, which means Blizzard considers them to be of equal level. There is a clear separation from 10 to 25 man level content there, and as we know, loot equals difficulty in theory anyway. Considering this, I think Blizzard intended 25 man to be easier, but since it was also easy, they've pushed bring the player, not the class philosophy into the game, things ended up being pretty much the same. I assume you mean 10 man to be easier, not 25 man, because that makes no logical sense. Both 10 and 25 mans are mind-numbingly easy, so the only difference is how much of a difference one player makes overall. That's a pretty clumsy sentence, but whatever. Which makes 10 man slightly harder. In my opinion, it is a mistake, and I think making them separate but equal is a good idea, since it allows for choice and variety, but I believe Blizzard will finally make up their mind when releasing Ulduar, hopefully. Yes, indeed, I do hope they make the call one way or the other. It is rather important for people to realise that they've just got to make the call. A bad plan is better than no plan at all. I don't like it when things are all over the place and it's just like, hey, there seems to be random levels of difficulty for no apparent reason at all. They make the argument that, hey, Wrath is friendly to the, it's raiding 101, but it's not, because the 10-man stuff is all over the place in difficulty. It's completely inconsistent. If you try to teach people how to raid, and then we go from 10 and 25 man, you realise that 10 man was actually harder than the 25. You're not teaching them anything other than the world's been turned upside down and shaken a lot, and stuff's still all over the floor, waiting to be picked up and put back in its proper place. Next one. This one's from Evil Utaku. He's a level 80 druid on Bailgun US, and he says this: Hey TB, I'm a relatively new raider. My guild was originally an alt guild with some of my friends that I used to work with. Their raiding guild broke up and they decided to take the alt guild into raiding. Now on a good day we can get 9 people on at the same time. We would have to go into a massive recruiting drive in order to get into 25-man raiding. So far, we are perfectly content to run 10-man content. We've attempted Sarf 1 Drake and had a blast. I think the 10-man content should be an entirely different instance from the 25-man. I would like the difficulty to be roughly the same. Maybe the gear from the 10-man would be useful for the 25-man. I believe that the logistics of getting 25 people to work together is part of the difficulty of the encounters and should have better rewards. Yeah, it's a pretty difficult argument to make, really, to say that, hey, you can... let's gear up in 10-mans for 25-man if you want to have it as the same difficulty, because that just doesn't make any sense. At the moment, though, that's what's happening. And what actually bothers me, and this is something we haven't brought up yet, is that a lot of guilds are actually having to do the 10-mans in order to do the 25-mans just for gear. And they're doing the same instance twice. They're being forced to effectively do 10-man and farm it till ad nauseum, and then do 25-man and then farm it to ad nauseum, realising, of course, that 25-man is pretty much identical. Which is kind of lousy, because when you graduated from 10 to 25s or 20 to 40s in the older world content, it was actually a different instance to play, not the same one with a couple of extra abilities. That's why I don't like heroics as regards to doing them. I don't do heroics, I'm not a big fan of them. I understand the purpose behind them, but I do think they are incredibly dull, and farming them is not something that I would ever really want to do. Now, anyway, that's the end of that. We will talk maybe a little bit about that later on, assuming we have time, which we probably won't, and we need to move on to the next topic. And that specifically, this time around, is Hearthstones. Yes, indeed. Now, there is a lot of uproar about the Hearthstone thing, and a lot of people are seeing it as Blizzard caving into casuals, caving into people who are entitled. Now, let me ask you one question. When was the last time that you actually saw people asking for a reduction in the Hearthstone cooldown? Because I don't remember ever seeing that. I read the forums on a daily basis. I have never seen that on EU side at all. In the 4 years that I have been reading those forums, I've never seen it happen. Really? Has it actually happened? Maybe the US side has. I don't know. But one way or the other, it seems to be like a pretty pitiful concern. I'm not bothered about the fact that they're reducing the cooldown to 30 minutes. It's not a slap in the face. It's not being kind of catering to these entitled casuals. Because it doesn't make a blind bit of difference. It's convenient for everybody. Except maybe for mages. But even then, for mages, it's convenient. We could set our Hearthstone in a ridiculous place and use it to get back there more quickly. How is that not a good thing? Why?
Maybe you could argue that, oh, well, it makes exploration of the world crap, but everyone's already seen it all. It doesn't matter. Convenience is more important now. We have seen the Barrens 20,000 times. We have seen everything 20,000 times. We fly over it, and we alt-tab out, or we go into Windows and we read something else. We Hearthstone there, we get a portal there, we do anything that doesn't involve walking or riding. We don't care about the content anymore, we are finished with it. It's fine, it's done, just deal with it. Exploration is not something that is in the game anymore, and that's kind of sad, but that's just the way all MMOs always end up going. Unless they have randomly or procedurally generated content, they will go down that route, where they will be explored, every nook and cranny will be emptied, and a bright, bright flashlight poked into every single corner. And everything will be found. Skeletons in the closet, cobwebs in the halls, and all. Removing some of the timer on Hearthstone does not ruin any aspect of the game that I can personally think of. Honestly. Why would it? Now, it does bring up an interesting question, however, and that's, why did they make the change in the first place? Again, change doesn't bother me. That's fine. Bring it on. I don't care. It's kind of convenient for my rogue. Not so much for my mage, but it really barely affects my actual play. I don't see a situation where I'm going to have to hop back and forth between areas of the game that I can't just fly to, you know, and just kick back and maybe watch some videos in the meantime, or read some books, or play another game while I'm flying along. Yes, some of us can do that. I don't see that being an issue. I don't see that being a factor or a problem in any respect. But it does bring up the question as to why it was put in the game. And you've got to have a look at the idea of happy money versus unhappy money. Now, this is a concept that some of you may not be familiar with. The idea is this. There is a debate as to whether or not money is just simply money, i.e. subscribers. Subscribers paying every month. Is there a difference between unhappy subscribers and happy subscribers? Is there a difference? If they are still subscribed, is there a difference from a business perspective? The answer, of course, being, well, not really. At least as far as I can tell. If you're paying, you're paying. Now, people who are unhappy, of course, depending on the level of unhappiness, are at risk of quitting. But then again, happy players are also at risk of quitting due to a wide variety of possible things that interfere with their playstyle, or maybe they just get bored. They could leave WoW thinking, well, you know, I've had my fill for the moment, I'm going to go do something else. And I've done that frequently. I generally don't quit because I'm unhappy with the game. I'm just kind of like, it's run its course for the time being. I'll come back when there's some new content. I'm going to go play something else for a while. Hey, I've got a Lotro account, and Lotro actually turned out to be pretty good. Maybe I'll actually get around to playing it this weekend. Unfortunately, since I'm now raiding again, it's something that I was probably going to have to go on the back burner for a while. Is there a difference between happy and unhappy money? Is there a point in catering to unhappy money? Well, to some degree, yes. If unhappy money is there for a very good reason, and unhappy money is unhappy because they have run out of content, then yes, catering to those people is paramount, because if you run out of content, you stop playing. Most normal people do. They don't treat the game like a glorified AOL chat. Whereas you make a change like this, and it's like, well, okay, does this make happy money happier? Possibly. Some people might be pleased by it. Most people, I would imagine, be pretty indifferent. It's kind of convenient. You know, this doesn't really make me any happier. At the moment, I'm happy money, but only because of what I'm doing. If I was just doing normal raiding and not doing, say, the level 60 stuff right now, I would probably be unhappy money. I'd be unhappy money because I have a lack of content. However, the promise of Ulduar and the fact that it's now on the PTR and probably going to be coming out very soon, it looks very cool, makes me happier money. At the end of the day, I'm still paying the same subscription fee that I would have been, whether it's happy or unhappy money. But the question is, who do you cater to? A change like this doesn't seem to cater to anybody, and that's something that's kind of odd. Changes to the game are often reactive, and sometimes a little bit knee-jerk reactive, and that is a bad thing. As, of course, we should be well aware by this point. Knee-jerk changes generally never end well. However, there are some changes which are a little bit more considered, and there are some changes which are just like whimsy. It's like Blizzard thinks, right, this has got to the stage now where this really doesn't matter anymore, we are doing this. It's like there was a change made a little while ago to the amount of gold that you could get from old school instances, and that doesn't affect most people. Indeed, it's actually had a negative effect on my playstyle because I play old school instances with Arcanist Belt, but it's not something that really bothers me all that much. But the question is, why did they make the change? I mean, that change is pretty much, as far as I can tell, universally unpopular. It doesn't benefit anyone. In fact, it is a disadvantage to everyone. If it's a disadvantage to anybody at all.
Those who raid level 60 content, yeah, it's a disadvantage to them. Those who go into 60 instances to get extra money, it's a disadvantage to them too. So you could argue that maybe it improves the economy, but I really can't see that argument holding much water. It's a very small change. And indeed, the Hearthstone cooldown is also a very small change. So perhaps you could argue that smaller changes are stuff that can simply be done on the basis of whimsy, and Blizzard will not really consider their impact on the player base because they feel they're simply too small. Now, of course, they do have an impact on player opinion, and they can change happy money to unhappy money. I don't believe that a small change like this could ever possibly change unhappy money to happy money, because unhappy money tends to have a better reason for being unhappy than a happy money has for being happy. You're totally confused now, I can tell. But regardless, it just puzzles me why they'd make little changes like this, but it also intrigues me to see the huge tidal wave of opinion that comes out of this. There are threads all over the forums about this. There are other forums as outside of the WoW forums that are actually discussing this. I believe it even popped up on our forums at some point. I saw it on Twitter feeds. I saw it on blogs. There's discussions going on about this tiny little change. I suppose it's kind of testament to just how passionate people can really get about WoW, and how in touch and in tune they are with the game's actual development, more so than most. They follow it to such a microcosmic degree that even the smallest change, it's like the chaos effect. Beating of a butterfly's wings halfway around the world causes a typhoon here. It's intriguing to watch. I don't really know what to make of it, but it's certainly good spectator sport. As for Hearthstones, well, you know what? In a couple of weeks when we get the change... yeah, that's a little bit optimistic. In the next patch when we get the change, we'll probably have forgotten all about it. And in a couple of years we'll wonder, wow, Hearthstones used to be an hour? Really? How inconvenient. My name is TotalBiscuit, and you're listening to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio. Get your topics in for the illusion of choice! Email themoloch@gmail.com, telling me what you want me to talk about for the last 15 or so minutes of the show. In the meantime, I'm going to play some Master Plan. We'll be right back after this. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast, an archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed due to copyright concerns. If you'd like to hear the music, tune in live on Fridays at 8 p.m. British Standard Time. That is 3 p.m. EST on WCRadio.com. Let's face it, everywhere you go, you see adverts for Ventrilo server providers. With so many to choose from, how do you make the decision about which is right for you and your guild? To help you with the decision, we brought in WoW Radio's very own bleeding-edge hardcore raiders to show you which provider the world's top players trust.
Loot the stupid car hound!
No. Tank it over there! You're setting the raid on fire!
Someone pulled ads, guys!
Oh, for God's sakes! Heal the tank! Heal the tank!
Hey, guys, it's okay to DI the tank, right?
Why are you smiting and not healing?
Is that a halibut? Are you DPSing with a halibut?
Leave George alone! You'll hurt his feelings!
You named that halibut?
Guys, I think we're wiping.
What gave you that idea?
Well, we're all standing in the graveyard arguing. UGT Ventrilo servers, the only choice for the elite of the elite. Hi, I'm TotalBiscuit, the best and sexiest mage on the planet. When you're like me, you don't have downtime between raids and promotional photo shoots. That's why I use UGT Ventrilo servers. I don't have to get my hands dirty trying to fix a broken server because it was never broken to begin with. UGT servers provide crystal clear voice communication with excellent hands-on support to make sure your server is always up and running. Not only that, their prices are so low, I was able to use the extra money to buy this £32 salmon. What? You didn't think I was going to be outdone by Dustin, did you? Hey guys, want to run some VRD? Get your premium quality Ventrilo server from UGTservers.com. Be the best. Well, second best. Yes, indeed, folks, you're tuning in to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit, and it's time for the illusion of choice! Yes, something like that. The illusion of choice, where you get to pick the last topic of the show. And we shall go to the email box to find one. I believe I do have one. I have one that I would like to talk about. It's good. We likes it.
but I can't find it. Where is it gone? Oh my god, the humanity of it all. Ah, there it is, yes. This one is from Christian Sandrup Sorensen, whose name I probably pronounced incredibly badly. He actually sent in like 5 of them, which I suppose is kind of cheating, but whatever. It's not a contest, folks. Now, this is particularly appropriate because I actually saw someone say something like this, and I'm going to see if I can pick it up. I'm going to see if I can find it. This is about twinks, and he'd like to know and have a little bit of a discussion about them. Now, here's the most pertinent thing. Let me go and find this thread. This was a thread I was reading earlier and I believe contributed to, and it was about level 60 lockout. And it was a pretty interesting idea, but it degenerated to some degree into something else entirely. And I found the thing rather intriguing. Now, let's see if I can actually find this. Level 60 lockdown. It should be on page 2, the particular thread. Here it is. There we go. Okay. This is a quote from Ginger of Dementia on Steamweedle Cartel, and they say this. I would agree with this suggestion. However, I have all utmost hate for the pathetic twink users. I want twink users to stupidly mistake leveling to 20, 30, 40, 50 and watch them cry on the forums, chat about how much gold they wasted, boo-hoo. I don't want a level lockdown to keep them safe. And some other guy says, actually it's the same guy, my view is that twinking is a form of griefing. Why? I'm not having fun while playing low-level battlegrounds. They are. They're lolling their backsides off while their EP doubles in size as I'm literally just a body bag being thrown from graveyard to graveyard, so there is the reason. And this is the best line ever. It's my reason, my opinion, and my belief. Don't like it, don't argue back. But no, it works the other way around. If I don't like it, I will argue back. If I like it, I probably won't. This is the way the real world works, as opposed to your skewed version of it. Idiot. Now, the fact that some people actually think twinking is griefing is, in my opinion, the most illogical, irrational piece of bollocks I have ever seen in my entire life. Probably isn't, but, hyperbole for the win. Now, why would people think this? They don't seem to realise that the guys who are kicking their asses in Battlegrounds, say, at level 80 are the guys with the better gear. This has happened through the entirety. Oh my god, you remember the rank 14 teams that schooled you? Was that unfair? No, they're just better than you. You can't expect a level playing field. The level playing field was there initially. It is your fault that your fat ass tilted it one way or the other. That's the issue here. You are the problem. Now, twinking, for me, from what I can see, and I have not engaged in it yet, but I do intend to at some point in the near future, before they decide to add XP to Battlegrounds to completely ruin it for everybody, is a cut-down version of the idea that WoW is based upon. And the idea that WoW is based upon is get to max level and gear your character. Advance your character to the utmost echelons that you possibly can, both in your individual skill and in the items that you possess. You can see it all over the place, in terms of achievements, for instance. That is a way to advance your character. It's not a linear way to advance your character. It's not a obvious power growth, but it is a way to advance your character by gaining achievement points, by gaining specific achievements and titles. It is an advancement. What about crafting? That is another way to advance your character. You can advance through the levels of crafting to max level, at which point you can attempt to acquire the rare recipes, assuming there would be any, had Blizzard not forgotten to put them in. What are you thinking? Anyway, besides that, what other ways are there to advance? Well, there's gear, that's an obvious one. There's arena rating, you can advance your arena rating team. All the while, people are looking to advance. Normal people wish to advance. That is a singular element of humanity itself. If it didn't happen, then the world would be a complete mess, even more so than it already is. There are some people that don't have that drive, and they're what we call scum. And quite frankly, should all be thrown in a pit. People that don't have the drive to advance generally evolve into what we call chavs. I say evolve. I think the word de-evolve would be more accurate. Trailer trash, rednecks, chavs, wasters, hobos, whatever you want to call them. Anyone that does not have the drive to succeed and advance themselves and would simply be content just to sit around and die. And it literally is dying. You are sitting there every second of your life, ticking away. You are not pushing yourselves forward. You are not advancing yourselves. That is the same kind of idea that I am seeing here. Anyone that is against twinking as regards to a playstyle, at least from the perspective of advancing yourself, yes, you really are looking at things from an entirely incorrect perspective. Now, I can understand why people don't like being ganked in Battlegrounds and killed in Battlegrounds, but let's face it, it's low level, you shouldn't be in there. There's no purpose. You cannot advance your character in a low level Battleground unless you are a twink. The only legitimate people in low level Battlegrounds are twinks, or people who are just trying them out as they level up. And to be honest, if they were playing the game properly, they wouldn't be doing that because you don't gain anything from it. Leveling up is a set of hurdles to get you to max level. The whole idea of the game is to advance your character. If you are not a twink, you do not advance your character in Battlegrounds. Twinking. The idea of twinking. What is the idea of twinking? To get the best character you can at a specific level, using the gear, enchants, and all manner of different things that are available. And the innovation I have seen in twink specs, as well as twink equipment, is unbelievable. It is a valid playstyle, a playstyle that should be supported. If people choose to play at a lower level and optimize at a lower level, they should be free to do so, and indeed Blizzard have not taken all that many measures against twinking, and I am glad of that. And as far as I'm concerned, they shouldn't take any measures against twinking. They should leave it as it is. Allow people to do so. Yes, these people have a lot of money and gold. I have a lot of gold. I'm sitting on like 9,000 gold. I've got nothing to do with it. Literally. I've got like another 6,000 gold of mats that I could sell. I can't be bothered doing crafting. I've crafted every enchant that I could possibly think of. I'm leveling up jewel crafting now just because it's a better benefit than tailoring. And even then, it's not going to burn that much of my cash. I'm still going to have plenty of cash left. What am I going to do with it? I could buy a stupid mount. Oh wait, I've got the best mount in the game. At least as far as I'm concerned, as regards to a land mount. The big Blizzard bear owns you. So what should I do? Well, I could create a twink. Why not? Sounds like a good idea to me. I have sausages the level 12 troll rogue. Oh yeah. You know how we do it. Sausages will come to dominate. And it's interesting because you can learn all manner of different aspects of your character by twinking, by using the limited resources available. I think it's pretty awesome. The idea of acquiring gear and min-maxing your character is something that level 80s do all the time. Level 60 did it, level 70s do it. Everyone who's capped level tries to min-max their character to some degree. Twinks simply do it at a lower level, and that, in my opinion, is legitimate. The hatred towards twinks is irrational. If you cannot stand the heat, get your face out of the damn oven. Seriously. It is ridiculous. I cannot understand the hatred towards twinking. So yes, my opinion of twinking, entirely valid. No issues with it whatsoever. Indeed, I actually believe that Blizzard should be discouraging people who are not twinks from going into those battlegrounds. They are the domain of twinks. They are kept active, indeed, because of twinks. Imagine what would happen if there were no twinks. You want to go in a lower level battleground? Good luck! Good luck. Yes, I imagine there are some people that do not go in low level battlegrounds because of twinks, but I would imagine that there are a lot more people that do, because they are twinks. And they play regularly, and they play organized, and they play good games. They do not zerg about. They play it properly because they have PvP experience. These are not people who are looking for an experience where they can dodge having to have skills. PvP skills? Do me a favor, seriously. Don't pretend that there's a massive difference in skill between PvPers. There isn't. It's a game that involves pushing button macros and occasionally maneuvering with a clumsy system. Compared to other games like FPSs, sports games, fighting games, proper competitive games, it is a walking joke as regards to competitive game style. It is easy. The difference is generally made by class versus class combinations, encounters, and equipment. There is a small amount of skill required, but there is not an awful lot of scaling that you can do. There is a very low glass ceiling that you can reach as regards to your skill, and you cannot go any higher because the game limits you in that respect. So don't give me that argument. I will not accept it. So yes, in my opinion, twinking, great playstyle, should continue. Sausages, the level 12 rogue, will get to 19 at some point when I can be bothered. And you know, maybe I'll try it myself. Because it sounds like a lot of fun to me. It's time for shoutouts, folks. I am absolutely exhausted. Good lord, I've had a really long day. So send your shoutouts to me at themurloc@gmail.com or email me on IRC. Email me on IRC, that's how tired I am. Do you have the internet number for this site, said Joe Biden. And I say email me on IRC. We're both cut of the same awful cloth as regards to technology. Yes, email me or PM me on our see with the shoutouts for the last couple of minutes of the show, and then I will absolutely be out of here. Someone sent me the Dern the Hungerer picture. No. That is like old as the hills, and it is pretty horrendous. What can I say? Shout-outs time. Hi, TB. First time being able to listen live in a long time. So glad I'm here. I'd like to give some shout-outs to the Bladefist US server, Horde side only, my guild Blood Gods, and me for finally getting to 80 these last couple of weeks. Naxxramas, here I come. It sucks. Don't go in. Also, shout out to you because you are awesome. Yes, Umar Ma, you are awesome. I'd like to shout out to TB, great shows. Don't do shout outs to me! I sound incredibly arrogant. More so than usual. Shout out to Sartharian for being annoying and being crafty on making blue void zones, confusing my raiders. Oh my god, they're different! A shout out to Oli, that's me, and Malrock, and the Blood Angels. Yes. Spess Marines. Epic guild. Also epic game, by the way. If you haven't got Dow 2 already, buy it, you idiots, and play it on at least Captain difficulty. My god, that game is amazing. Shout out to Arcanist Belt for letting this poor warlock in. Hopefully we'll kill Ragnaros soon. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! We're gonna kill Rag. We're gonna kill Rag on Saturday. Yeah! We're gonna go and own his face off. Oh, and shout out to Kimiyama and to the Kittles. What on earth? I have no idea what that is. Can I have a shout out to me for missing half the bloody show? That's from Seath. Weakling! Fools! We shall take away your metal boxes. A shout out, long time listener. Shout out. No, stop it. P.S. You are not arrogant. That's a lie. Martin Quorford is a big liar. Let it be known. Let it be known he's a liar. You're horrible. A shout out to everyone on Doomhammer EU and the guild Dark Rage. That's from Ragavale. A shout out to my guild No RL, only AFK, for getting the Immortal Achievement in Nax 25. That's from Shout Halls. That's Celerity. That was from my old server. I've left you now to go back to a better server. We're back on top of the realm, only because I left. Har har. 2 Ghosts of Bane on Ice Crown US from Turkalton? What was that? Turkalton, level 80 Affliction Warlock. Oh yeah, what else have we got? We have shout-outs from Dunkirk. A shout-out to you for what you said last week. I made my own guild, Vanity of Dentag EU. Yes, indeed. If you can't find a guild that suits you, make your own. No more of these awesome stuff. Yes, a shout-out to Ariana from Riff Raff. I see you for running the Blue Plz Text Adventures. If you haven't been in IRC, we've got this great, crazy roleplay thing going on that we've been running over the past couple of weeks, and we'll continue, so you should be there. It's awesome. Shout out to Ariana for the Great Text Adventures. That's from Ekchag, the org. And shout out to the guild ATD on Hellscream US. It's time to put KT down on his arse. Be better, you should have killed him already. A shout out to me for proposing this challenge to you, TB. I will down Arthas before you. Ha! The winner may call the other one a noob. That's from Malvu. We shall see! We shall certainly see. I don't think you will. I'll bring it on. Shout out to me for catching only the shout-outs from Mr. NNJ. You're even worse than the last guy. I'm out of here, folks. My name's been TotalBiscuit. You have been listening to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio. Check out our other fine shows at wcradio.com. And if you like what we're doing, we spend a lot of money keeping our servers up every month. Feel free to donate to us using the donate button on our brand new shiny site. More features will be coming soon. The archives will be returning. If you are missing out on old shows and you want to catch them, then use iTunes. The RSS feeds are still available. You can download the old shows. Alternatively, go on the forums. We have posted a way of getting the old shows before the archives go up. I am absolutely 110% done. I am spent. I am out of here. Good night.
You have been listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz, a show that airs exclusively on WCRadio.com on Fridays at 8 p.m. British Standard Time. That's 3 p.m. EST. You can check out our archives on our website at WCRadio.com and subscribe to our RSS feeds. Don't forget to rate and review us using iTunes, and if you wish to leave constructive criticism, that is always appreciated. Head over to WCRadio.com/forum and post in the threads there. Thank you for listening.